Today we're going to paint daisies, and I'm really excited about these. We're going to paint them in all sorts of different angles, and we're just going to do the simple white daisies. And to do that, I'm just going to use whatever is on my palette. If you don't have any paint on your palette, you can easily do this or recreate what I'm doing just by picking up a little bit of a color, placing it on your palette, and then adding in a lot of water. You can do that just with your brush, or you can even use a little squirt bottle like this and wet your palette so it's easier to pick up your paint. I'm also going to wet the rest of my paints while I'm at it. Because you never know what colors you'll use. Alright, so I've got my pink up here, and my brush is pretty saturated. It's got a lot of water in the bristles, and I'm just rinsing that. And I'm just going to mix that right into this paint that's already here. So it's more of a pink color that I've got going on, and we're going to start with the forward-facing daisy. And I'm going to start with the petals and then do the center afterward. So I'm going to start by painting some petals, and that might be a little bit too dark for what we're going for with a white daisy look. So I'm just going to dab off my brush on this paper towel so I can pick up some of that excess water. We want this to be really, really soft and light. And actually, before we get started, I want to show you the stroke that we are using. I'm going to use a darker color so you can really see what I'm doing. So I'm holding my brush at an angle, and I'm starting at the center, pressing down, and then just dragging my brush, and then lifting up before I can kind of slide my brush this way. So when you're doing leaves, you press down and you kind of pull your brush up a little bit to create that point at either end. And with daisies, you want that rounded end. And so you want to try and just drag your brush along and then lift up. They might be a little bit of a point just because of the nature of the round brush does have that point on it, but you just want to be mindful that you're just kind of picking up so that you have that rounded end. You can also, if it's more comfortable for you, outline the petal and quickly fill it in. But I find that if I do this, my daisy looks too perfect. And I like mine to look a little imperfect. It helps it look a little more natural. So that's my personal preference. And then now I'll show you how I build a daisy. So I'm going back to that pink color. I know it was a little bit too dark, so I'm adding even more water. And I'm starting with all of my petals are going to point toward the center here. And you can paint your daisies any color. They don't have to be white or this blushy color. In fact, when I paint some other angles, I'm going to change up the color a little bit. And if it's easier for you to turn your paper so that you get a consistent petal, you can totally do that. But I'm just making sure all of my petals are pointing toward the center here. And then I'm just going to let that dry. Now I'm going to use this kind of blue-green color that's over on this side of my palette. So when you're painting white, you're actually painting the colors that are reflecting onto the white, if that makes sense. So like, think about green leaves, the yellow centers. Okay, so I've got this kind of greenish gray color. And then I'm going to paint a side-facing daisy. And to do that, I'm going to start at the end where the petals are the furthest away from me. And then when I get over here, where the petals are closer to me, they're going to get really short. Now we can do the same kind of angle, but instead have the petals that are closer to us be the longer ones. So to do that, I like to start with my longer petals so I can get a feel for the angle. And then last, one that's facing away from us all the way, you're just going to be seeing the longer petals here. That's kind of a weird brown color. Let's go for more of a dusty purple here. So actually I'm gonna pick that up with my paper towel so we don't have that orangish gray color anymore. Now something you need to remember with daisies is all of the petals always point back toward the center. So that should help you with placement. Now with this one, because we're seeing the underneath side, I'm going to add green here in the center and then add the stem right down from there. Alright, now something has happened over here with this first daisy where all of my petals are kind of blending together. And this is totally fixable. You just have to make sure that that layer is dry completely before you go back over. And I'm just going to go back over a few of these. And I know it's darker. This is mostly so that you can see what I'm doing here. But I'm being more careful to leave a space in between the petals so that they don't blend together. And now I'm going to wait for these to dry completely and then I'm going to add the yellow centers. Alright, now my flowers are dry, so I'm going to go back in and add a yellow center. And I'm just going to paint a yellow circle right in the center here. I'm going to go with something a little bit lighter for this next one. Now to get some more definition in here, you could leave it as is. I'm going to go in with my same brush, and I'm just going to add some little strokes here to help define some of the petals and give it a little more depth. And I'm just using the same color again, but that just helps break it up a little bit. You could use a smaller brush too if the bigger brush is a little bit too tricky to use for these small details. Now if you were doing an all white flower, I've obviously added some pink here. But if you were doing all white, I'll show you over here what I'm going to do, because that one looks a little more on the white side. And it's totally up to you how much detail you want to add. You might just need a few little strokes. You may want to add onto your entire petal. Over here I'll do kind of a minimal detail so you can see what that looks like. Okay, now for these over here, where this is looking a little bit more on the white side, I'm just going to be careful and still use that pale color. But it's going to be really minimal here. I'm going to show you one more type of daisy. This is the Gerber Daisy, and they just have an extra layer of petals in the center. So for these, I'm actually going to start with the center. I'll show you two different angles here. So this one will be side facing, this one will be forward facing. And I'm going to let those dry completely before I move on. Okay, so they have these like little tiny petals. And I'm going to do a couple different layers. Just so you can really see them. And I'm just painting these little dashed lines. Nothing perfect. So I'll start there. And then I'll paint this one blue over here. You'll just have to look up photos of Gerber daisies. Some of them have dark centers and some of them have light centers like this. You really can't go wrong, whatever you prefer. And then I'm going to go in and add my petals after that. And Gerber daisies are fun because they come in all sorts of really bright, beautiful colors. Well, I just realized that you couldn't even see that. It was out of frame. I'll show you on this one. I'll add another layer of petals here. The Gerber daisies also have several layers of petals, so that's what I'm trying to recreate here. So I'm going to let this dry before I go and try and define some of these petals. I'm just adding a darker color here because I really want to show that separation between the center and the outer petals. But it's definitely a personal preference thing. You definitely don't need to do that. And in fact, I'm going to wait until this dries and then make this a dark center so you can see what that looks like. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of black and then go right over the top of the center. Now when I don't get enough pigment like this, I know that I had too much water in my brush. So I just dabbed off the excess water on a paper towel, picked up more paint, there we go. Be sure to download the step-by-step guide so that you can see these broken down for you.